Now let's get to our interview with the guest of the day. I am joined by a startup business lawyer and financial analyst, Edoigiawarie, tonight to discussing the gains of President Tinubu's trip to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Mori.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure having you on Politics Tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so before we get into our core issues for tonight, let's start with how the President's administration is running the economy. What's your impression about it?
Well, considering what they met on ground, I think they had a bit too much to chew from the onset. And I think that the dynamics at the time of swearing in, especially with some of the pronouncements of the president, seem to have, in some quarters, showed some optimism, but in other quarters raised some panic, like the issue of fuel subsidy. But we're beyond that. There is an above average commitment to cleaning the system, fixing the mess of the last 8 years, but even more importantly, realigning our economy for foreign investment. It appears that in the last 4 years, we seem to have used certain funny policies to close our doors. But what I can see is a commitment to reopen our doors and open up the way for investments. When introducing me, you referred to me as a startup attorney, and that's the core of what I do, working with startups. And if there's any sector of this country that continues to innovate and push Africa and Nigeria forward, it is the startup ecosystem, where we're building, you have techpreneurs building innovative products. So I think that the government has shown, the will to give credence to that innovative growth, to open up our doors, and to really, really, let things happen. But will that will be backed by the requisite action and the necessary speed? Time will tell. It's too early to pass judgment.
But long story short, you're quite impressed.
Oh, yes, of course. So we don't have a docile approach to issues. There seems to be some level of pragmatism. And for instance, if you look at our immigration interior matters, the ministry has shown some level of forthrightness with clearing the backlogs, opening up, and I'm very excited with the reciprocity regulation that seems to be in the works. Look, we give you the visa you give us, we give you the courtesy you accord to us, right? And that's interesting. Even the new leadership in the CBN seems to be keeping the fire from burning, right? Keeping us from conflagrating, but we still have a long way to go, a very long way to go. The work lies ahead. I'm sure you heard MBS has released that the inflation rate is still going higher, 27.33, right? So I think, when it peaks, it dips. But that depends on how much, fiscal engineering and how much ingenuity our financial regulators and economic advisors to the president are able to bring to the table, right? But yes, above average and well on our way to a very good.
All right. So as part of the president's commitments to reviving the economy, he continues with his drive to attract foreign investors to the country to boost the economy. But how well do you think this is yielding the desired results?
So, I think the last time I was here, that was this morning, I was saying that Nigeria is a good place to do business because the challenges we have, the numbers we have, our level of consumption is every hardworking entrepreneur's delight, right? But the journey lies ahead. The president has clearly shown that I am willing to open our doors. I like what he said at the Saudi summit, right? He says, look, your money will go in and come out. I'm going to open it up, right? Your funds will come in and go out without hindrance. And that's what any investor wants, that assurance. But you see, there's an adage in my place or in Igbo land that says, you've got to be fine at home before going outside. So there are a couple of things that need to be tidied up internally, and I see, that's being done, but possibly more can be done, right, to ensure that we have concerted efforts for the investors to say, yes, really, right? So what are our immigration procedures? What are the ease of doing business, right? What are as lawyers, what are dispute resolution mechanisms for commercial transactions, right? But that's let's even talk on that issue. It's a double-edged sword, because while the courts have the power within them to ensure that disputes, commercial disputes, are fast-tracked, and people have faith in the fact that when they bring commercial disputes, they are addressed within time, because in business, time is money. But you also have to look at the constraints of the judiciary, right? You also have to look at the fact that, do we have enough judges? Do we have enough facilities? Are we leveraging adequately on technology? I like to say, Lagos is a very wonderful bubble. Port Harcourt, Abuja, some of these hotspots are beautiful bubbles. But when you go to other areas, you realize that it's not as sweet as you think that it is. They don't have the reliance on technology as much. And really, in this time and age, if you haven't got technology, you haven't started, right? Technology makes it easier for you to do things, faster, do more faster, right? So these are some of the challenges that government must now look at. I'm excited with Dr. Bosun Tijani's plan in the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy, but that has to be institutionalized in such a way that you are enabling all the sectors with the requisite support and long-term, right? Because we've got to begin to look beyond 8 years. We've got to begin to set institutional mechanisms in place where you have adequate plans for the next 50 years, for the next 100 years, right? And everything is reasonably cast in stone. The Startup Ecosystem again, so I will talk about that, right? So the Startup Act was signed in October 2022, and this is November 2023. A lot of things haven't happened because some of the key things that should be done have not been done, right? So every day I walk into forums where I speak, startups walk up to me and say, look, when am I going to get labeled? They say to me, when am I going to start getting the incentives under the Act, right? But a lot back end still needs to be done. What is stalling it? Maybe more than, we can say. But the fact is, government must now begin to not just, speak to the issues, back it up with the right political energy, and clear those bottlenecks and bureaucracies that come. One thing that's very, very important is there must be a very tidy synergy between the public office holders, the political appointees, and the civil service, who are the actual front row players in any transformative agenda of government. Because they are there, they are the barracks, politicians come and go. And if you don't institutionalize these mechanisms, you will continue to have situations in place where, one person is running with a beautiful agenda and the people around behind him are just strolling and coming along.
Right, so we'll get there and also talk about the challenges and the solutions therein. But first, let's talk about this president's trip to Saudi Arabia for the Saudi Africa Summit.
Yes.
How significant is this for the country?
It is. It's very significant because Nigeria, as the most populous black nation in the world, must be at the center stage of any conversation that has to do with Africa. It is an anomaly for Nigeria not to be involved in key conversations on the global scene
that's a
that
fact.
have to do with the black race, right? And any president that is president of Nigeria is a de facto president of Africa, because every other country in Africa looks to Nigeria. Our political situation, our economic situation are closely studied because we determine the pace for other countries to follow. So, Saudi Arabia comes up to say, look, we really want to now start. And I said this a couple of months ago. Africa is the place to go to. Africa is the new destination for investment. Nigeria must be at that center stage for that investment, right? So Saudi Arabia is joining the BRICS, and all the other global allies that are looking at Africa. And they've come up with a 500 billion euro fund for Africa. So it's interesting that Mr. President and his team have gone. I like the fact that every visit, every foreign trip since he became president, he doesn't just go with the typical bandwagon team, but goes with relevant ministers, relevant members of government who can have those conversations. And that's a transactional thing, right? Because as a leader of a country like Nigeria, you've got to be very transactional and very on your feet with conversations with the West, right? So you're talking about aviation, the Minister of Aviation must be sitting beside you, right? You're talking about technology, the Minister of Technology must be with you. Talking of trade and investment, you've got to have these ministers. So because a president literally just opens the door, right? Shows the political will. It is the ministers and those working with him that will continue the conversation and ensure that the deal is closed. So it's a welcome development. We can't sit here and think that everything is perfect, that everything is working. No, right? We've got to go out, right? You've got to go and attract investment. What we need to do here is also to ensure that what we're promising our investors outside, we're matching it with the reality on ground, right? So if I say to you that I've got light at home, right, you want to be able to independently verify that, yes, really, I've got light in my house, right? So these are some of the things that...
So that will basically form the core of our discussion tonight. Because, but let's look at the key takeaways and fallouts of this trip. One is the planned inauguration of a Nigeria-Saudi Business Council anytime soon. What impact do you think this can have on investments between the two countries?
So it's a double-edged sword, right? And essentially for both sides. Two things. If we don't handle it well, what will happen would be more tilted towards the Saudian benefit, right? Where, they are importing or, they are taking out what they need. But where it's well balanced, it's also an opportunity for export. I had said, look, crude oil is great, but in the next 40 years or so, it's going to be drying up. So what do we need to do? We need to look for other viable means. And you'll be shocked that cassava, one of the end products is ethanol, right? And in the Western world, biofuels are some of the key ingredients that are utilized, by them, because a lot of them are moving from crude oil products. So that business council is very key because what you're going to have would be a synergy between Nigerian and Saudian businesses. Saudi is opening up, right? They're becoming a bit less conservative. They are beginning to welcome the world. They want to now invest. You see, you can't keep money. You've got to invest money. Africa is the best place to invest. Nigeria is one of the best destinations because you have 230 million people who are consuming, right? And you have one of the best crop of creatives, best crop of resilient and hardworking people in Nigeria. So this is a place to invest. If we can tidy up our internal issues that are not unique to only us as a country, then, hey, it's a good place to invest. And that business council is one avenue to harness that investment. My worry is that it is not lopsided to their benefits.
Right. So allow me go back to one of the points you raised earlier and juxtaposing this with one key message of President Tinubu to investors in Saudi Arabia. That Nigeria is open, truly open for business. I mean, you said that earlier also. But how favorable is the business environment in the country now?
So it's improving. It's a work in progress. I'm not in government, so I can't speak for government.
You're a startup,
but as someone who utilizes literally all the business regulatory agencies in service to clients, I know that there have been a remarkable improvement. And even before this administration started, for instance, the ease of company registration had been, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, had been improving over time. But in the last 3 years, you've seen remarkable speed in the business registration process, automation of stuff. And that takes us back to technology, right? And that template is being copied across other agencies, but you still have those tiny bottlenecks. You still have those institutionalized red tape, corruption, civil service apathy to work, that needs to be fixed, right? You also have the ambience, right? So the first thing, you see, no matter how beautiful this studio is, if the door stinks, right, it gives you a bad feeling even before you come in. Like my mom would say, God bless her soul, you never have a second opportunity to make a first impression. So we must begin to even look at things as simple as our airports. What is the ease of immigration, getting down, you know, queue. I have never, and I have traveled extensively, I have never queued in an immigration queue in any country as much as I queue every time I come back home, right? So these are some of the red tapes that we've got to start clearing out, right? What is the time frame? And it's just about service delivery, you know, ensuring that, you know, certain things are done with best practice in mind. You know, when you do those things, you really show that, yes, you are ready for business, right? Like I said, dispute resolution is very key. Ensuring that our courts are equipped to handle disputes speedily, you know, and be proactive to issues. Ensure that regulators are on their feet, you know, and understand how to leverage on technology to provide innovative services. And then the issue of security, tidy that up, you know, with a bit more intentionality. And I think that when these things are done, what we will be saying to the world is that we're speaking one language, right?
Okay. And again, I think they say when you acknowledge that there is a problem, it's easier for you to get solutions. I'm saying this because very interesting, some Nigerians have said President Tinubu is admitting to investors that Nigeria has serious deficits in port infrastructure, power infrastructure, and agro-allied facilities that will enable sustainable food security. How profound is this for you?
Well, yeah, so he's been vulnerable and he's been honest, right? So he's not painting a beautiful picture. Oh, yeah.
We're good.
We're good. You know, just come and invest and make your money. He's saying, look, we have problems, but if you help us provide the solutions to our problems, you make money. And I assure you that you get your money out as speedily as it came in, right? And like I said, an entrepreneur's delight is fixing problems, right? Finding solutions to problems and making profit. That's what an entrepreneur does, right? So, and we're a bundle of problems. We have problems in this country, right? Power is a problem. And anybody who invests meaningfully in power and can solve the power problem will become a trillionaire.
So it's one thing to say and it's one thing to do. What would you say to President Tinubu in this regard?
Sorry?
It's one thing to say and another thing to do. Yes.
Political will. Back them up with the right political will. So, for instance, you see, if you have an emergency and everybody on your team are unable to fix, or the status quo is problematic, and someone shows up and says, oh, I can get this done, you will do all you can to back that person up to ensure that it's done. Two things will happen. The person will succeed, and you will be able to identify if there were internal factors or persons or issues that made it possible for others not to succeed, right? And so what every investor needs is the requisite support from government, the political will backing up whatever they intend to do. And, you know, I have always been one who believes in negotiating from a place of importance. I really don't like hands out, right? Negotiating from a place of relevance. Of course, we have the numbers. And if we have the numbers, if we have the market, then we should be able to make the money, right? So you can't throw change to us. You need us. You need us, right? Whether to invest money, whether to make money, you need our numbers. And if you need our numbers, you've got to treat us with respect. But even we have got to earn that respect, right? Because some of the challenges that we face today span from issues of internal sabotage, right? Or apathy, you know, towards doing the right thing. And so when you fix these issues, and like I said, one of the biggest problems Nigeria has is the lack of consequences. So if the Controller General of Immigration, for instance, gives an order and says that no foreigner on the queue must spend less than 5 minutes, it will be done. And where it is not done, whoever has made it impossible for that to happen will be sanctioned. Right? But also ensure that the people who are servicing these persons also have the right knowledge, also have understanding of navigating, how to navigate technology properly, right? And have the right equipment. So these are all the issues. Our issues are a lot. And oftentimes, the biggest challenge government has when they come in is that you expect them to solve a big problem in so little time. And if we were discussing politics, if we do the maths about political permutation, you spend the first 2 years trying to balance and understand yourself. You spend the second 2 years trying to get re-elected, and then you spend the next, and then when you come in for a second term, when you get re-elected, you are preoccupied with, who's going to succeed you. And, so it takes a disciplined leader, whether president, whether governor, whether local government chairman, to focus on the issues and not allow politics and political commitments seep into those issues.
Right. So you have consistently talked about bottlenecks, and President Tinubu has also told the Saudi investors that he will remove all bottlenecks to investors. Let's be practical here. What are those bottlenecks?
Well, power is one of our biggest challenges to manufacturing and investment. If you speak to any businessman in this country, they will tell you they are grappling with the issues of power. So I think that it's time to really look at it,
Decisively.
And what really, is the problem with power? Kini gong 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 in Yoruba language. What exactly is the issue? And then attack it. So a band-aid effect will never solve the problem. You've got to rip open the wound and start treating from the source. How did we get here, right? And you will even look that even the distribution companies have a challenge with urban explosion. You have migration. Some cities were built for manufacturing, where some areas, for instance, were tailored towards high volume power consumption. Today, a lot of those places have become residential, right? So there's imbalance, and this is in the urban areas. So it's beyond just trying to even fix the dams or fix the distribution networks, to even look at how distribution is going on, right? And if there's a proper balance. That's one. Secondly, the issue of security, right? Security is very key. An investor wants to walk in here and know that he's safe, right? I see it as an anomaly that you have investors come in and you have, security persons picking them, moving them from place to place because they're afraid of getting kidnapped. Right? That's a red flag. And in fact, it just shows how attractive Nigeria is, that despite our security, peculiarities, they continue to come, right? So that has to be done holistically, And then you have ease of doing business, right? The Buhari administration, and I must commend Dr. Edoigiawarie and her team, PEBEC, they did quite well, right? Especially the Omnibus Act, right? The Ease of Doing Business Act that was passed, and that's a game changer. Enforcement is now the next thing. I spoke to you about the Startup Act. We're still trying to implement, right? You've got to now push that enforcement, because one of the key things, for instance, says, look, if you come to one regulator for a license and you need 5 other regulators to give you different licenses, the first regulator who receives your request takes it on and ensures that you obtain the rest, right? Because government is one. And you can't have them work in silos, right? I can't pick up my paper from regulator A and I'm running to regulator B and they're saying, no, we don't understand what you're doing, but I've gotten the clearance from. So you've got to collapse that into one. Government is one, right? And so if we begin to enforce these things properly, synergize the relationship between agencies of government, that is very key, right? Because what we have in the ease of doing business are different agencies working in silos. And I often say when I meet a brick wall, I say, look, what is the common objective? Service a customer, build a name for Nigeria. So you've got to now take these things seriously, right? So these are some of the challenges that, government has to do, and then show adequate support for due process, right? Adequate support for due process. Because oftentimes when I speak to investors, and they say to me, we know that, there are other ways. So when you ask them, so this is the procedure, and they say, okay, that's noted, but what of the other way? I say, there's no other way. This is how we do things. I say, no. I say, no, there's no other way. This is how we do things. This is how it should be done, right? But that's me. That's Omori. There may be people who tell them, look, it's possible to circumvent. Perception is key. And this is where I wonder where NOA is, where all these agencies are, what the Ministry of Information is doing. We've got to create that perception where people know that Nigeria is not a place where you circumvent due process. Nigeria is a place where due process can work for you in reasonable time, and not where you circumvent if you want result faster. And the people at the forefront of this challenge are not the political office holders, are the civil servants, are the people who are there for 30 years, who are there for 35 years, who are there for 15 years, who are there repeatedly, right? These are the persons who you must now ensure that they do the right thing.